Committed Christians are a minority in the world. We are surrounded by vast numbers of people who do not share our commitment. This is one of the greatest reasons why a gathering like this is valuable. We need one another because we do not do very well alone. And to see this great company and to think of the commitment represented, this lifts our spirits tremendously. It is a fact that I have a personal connection with almost everyone in this company. And for that, I am profoundly grateful. For it is upon you that we depend. I like to look out and see a group from Sugar Grove, a country church. I like to see a group from Columbus, Ohio, a great city. I see people from Kokomo. I see people from Rising Sun, Maryland. A number from West Virginia. On and on I could go with these. And they lift me tremendously. As I think of the personal connection with each one of you, I try to think where that commenced. For example, over here is John Wong. Virginia and I met him first in Hong Kong. And out of 3,000 students at the college there, we soon believed that he was the one who had the most promise. And then he came to this country. He finished his studies, eventually was granted a Doctor of Philosophy degree at the University of Alabama, and is today a member of the teaching staff of a great institution, Iowa State University at Ames, Iowa, and is the president of the Yokefellow Movement of Iowa. That's one example. Here on my left is Peggy Beckham. I first met her in Athens when we had a remarkable group of students going throughout Greece and Turkey, ending with a great flair at Ephesus. All of these were wonderful days. And then this led to subsequent connections with Peggy in England when we had the Yokefellow tour, already mentioned. And to think that she could take the time to come from Abilene and be here with us, this is very good. You see, you're bound to wonder whether it is right to go on with the annual conference. Your travel, for most of you, is very expensive. It costs you a great deal in time and in effort. But tonight I am convinced that it is worthwhile because of the tremendous need we have for one another. Henry Doherty has been introduced. He grew up in North Ireland. I met him first in Alabama and saw that he was a person of promise. And since then, he has lived in various places, longest of all being in Arizona, at Sedona, where the famous Red Rocks are, and where I have had the great privilege of leading retreats for the Christian people there under his care. And now he has gone to North Carolina. And though I am trying to give up travel and speaking, I have promised him that I will go there next October and do all that I can to help him to start a new chapter of Christian vitality in that great state where so much of my heart naturally remains. I look over here at Hal Owen and his crowd from Maryland. I know when I first saw him, he came into my daughter's house in Maryland, and we have been closely associated ever since. And now he has the courage and the imagination to start a new kind of yokefellow movement. You'll hear more about it later, but it will be begun on the 5th day of May this year. I look at Naomi Pickering, who will speak tomorrow, and her son Dwayne, and her husband Robert. And I think what an amazing thing they have done in building a renewal center in northwest Ohio, 12 miles northwest of Defiance. And in the last 2 decades, it has literally changed hundreds and hundreds of human lives. And of course, that's the business that we are in. I'm so glad that Alice McConnell is here. This is her first visit since the death of her distinguished husband, Mickey McConnell. She lives now in North Carolina, and we hope that she might come. We did not know that she could, and the fact that she could is very encouraging. I could go on with these other tables in the same way, and if you are not mentioned in this way, do not think that you are neglected. You are not. There are just so many. And so, you see, the character of this company is extremely different from the average because the participation is so great. There's no audience here. All are members of the team. And this is a tremendous thing. Now we wonder how we're going to change the world. And the motto behind me represents the essence of our dream. Now there may be people who do not know that this is the second Earlham Hall in this vicinity. The original building, begun in 1847, finally decayed terribly, so that it was really dangerous. And with the generous help of the late Eli Lilly, who supported 1/3 of the cost, we decided to build this magnificent structure. And Tom Jones, the famous president who did so much to make Earlham a national institution, was standing right out here one day before the floor was in. It was just rough cement. The fireplace was already here, but of course there was no mantel. And Tom said, you know, we've got to have something over the fireplace. Could we take one of the beams from the old Earlham Hall? You see, it was not torn down yet at that time. It was out here where the circle is. Could we take one of the beams and put it there? And of course, we all agreed that that was right, to make the continuity. But he said, you've got to have words. Words convey ideas. And within less than a minute, we chose this model. I don't want there to be one person in this company who does not understand it. It comes from the year 1658. In that year, a newly constructed ship, very much like the Mayflower, was named the Woodhouse. The captain was Robert Fowler, Fowler. The people who came on that ship all expected to die because they thought they were going to Massachusetts Bay, and they expected to be executed in Boston. One was. On the shore just outside of Portsmouth, England, they had to make some repairs to the ship. And you might suppose that the passengers would sit and mope. Not so. Every passenger went on shore and tried to find somebody and to build a fellowship. And the captain wrote about this in the log. I've held this in my hands in London. And in the log he said, the ministers of Christ were not idle. They gathered sticks and kindled a fire and left it burning. You like that? This is what the Christian strategy is. You don't do it alone. It's pretty hard to have much of a fire with one log. You've got to get like-minded with people who are ready, and then you ignite one another. And if you do enough of that, something tremendous will occur, the way it has at Defiance, Ohio, with the gathering done by the Pickerings. Christianity is the most social of all the religions. There are religions in which you can operate alone. Makes no difference at all. Not so with the religion of Jesus Christ. You've either got to make or discover a fellowship of other burning hearts. And remember that the rule is one loving heart sets another on fire. And so we transcend individuals, we transcend location, and we transcend time. I was helped by Gene Shute and Maxine Hampton, as they brought us right back to the middle of the 18th century. I pictured the refugee German, George Friedrich Handel, and I thought how marvelous that he could make that aria, "Come to him, all ye that labor, take his yoke upon you, and you will find." Isn't that marvelous? Just exactly as good as it was 240 years ago. You see, time has nothing to do with it. So we bridge the gaps of time and we bridge the gaps of space, but above all, we bridge the gaps of individuality so that we care about one another and love one another. And if I can do anything tonight to make you feel that we are in a great business, I'm going to do it. Now, there is no way in which I can assure you more of a great business than to use words which are for me a kind of a constant reminder of my own vocation. Some of you must know these by heart. If not, I hope you learn them, because you have many times that you could use them. I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good thing, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show to any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not withhold or defer it. I shall not pass this way again. I'm 83 years old. I don't know whether I've got 1 year to live, or 2, or 10, or what. And you don't either. But I suppose that I'm the farthest along on this journey of almost anybody in the company. So you'll all be able to bury me, and that will be a great joy, I hope. But though I don't know when, I don't much care when. What I do know is that as long as I have breath and effort, I'm going to do just what I said a moment ago. Now let's adopt this as your rule too. Your rule is, if there is any kindness you can show, you do it. What is the kindness that is so needed now? There may be many kinds, but the primary one is that in which you help people to get solid in their minds. There is an unbelievable amount of confusion. Part of this is because of our very poor education. 2 weeks ago, we tried very hard to get a new shipment of the dialogues of Plato. And Kathy phoned in to one of the great companies that produces books. And finally the shipment came. It was about Chairman Mao. Now, how you could get from 4th century BC down to Chairman Mao, I don't know. And Kathy phoned 5 times. Fortunately, it was an 800 number, so it didn't cost us anything. She had to get 5 different people in that publishing house on the phone before anybody found out what was wrong. They just simply do not know. We find that the majority of our people cannot name the 4 Gospels. Did you know that? I gave an examination in a college that I won't name because I don't want to hurt its reputation. And in the examination, I said, give the main literary connections between the 4 Gospels. And one senior in this good college wrote on his paper, sir, I have tried very hard to think what you must mean by the 4 Gospels. I do not know. I assume you mean Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Christianity. And as for their literary connections, I have no idea. Virginia told me that sometimes for her sins she listens to these contests where people get great amounts of money for saying stupid things. And one of the questions was, which book of the Bible tells about the movement of the people of Israel out of Egypt? So the bright fellow who was working for $1,000 said, I suppose that would have to be the book of Hebrews because those Jews were Hebrews. I wish that I were giving you a silly caricature. I'm not. It's that bad. We have a terribly illiterate generation. What then is your task? Your task is to be Christian intellectuals. Now, I know how some of you will back off from that, thinking that you are showing how modest you are. Well, you're not. You're just showing how cowardly you are. And there's a thin line between cowardice and humility, I'll tell you that. And you better watch whether you cross that line. Your task is to help people to think and to think clearly. But in order to do that, you have to do thinking yourself. You must become careful readers of the best that has been produced for centuries. Because otherwise, many people will never even hear of some of these things. I suppose the most concrete thing that Jim Newby is doing as director of the Yokefellow Academy is to introduce people to the great Christian classics. And hundreds of people say, why, we never even saw one of them. We have just now republished the prayers of Robert Louis Stevenson. Oh, they are beautiful. We were able to get it out in a paperback for only $2.50. Stevenson's prayers are some of the most lovely on earth. But practically every person who looks at that little volume will say, I didn't know that Stevenson ever wrote a prayer. Now, Stevenson died in Samoa. Died much too early of tuberculosis. And James, when you were telling people how to get to the discussion groups, I thought about Robert Louis Stevenson. Because somebody wanted to know how to get to Samoa. And Stevenson said, take a ship at San Francisco, and my place is the first one on the left. Now, he could have said, go for 170 degrees west longitude and 14 degrees south latitude, but he didn't say that. But what a joy for people to get acquainted with some really high-class things. It is wonderful to see how people rise in getting acquainted with the prayers of Dr. Samuel Johnson. I'll tell you, you folks, you better watch out. I'm liable to make you a Johnsonian if I can, because there comes real depth. When we had our young fellow group in England and were with Malcolm Muggeridge at his home in Sussex, James or somebody else asked, who's the greatest Englishman who ever lived? And with no hesitation, Muggeridge said, Samuel Johnson. Why? Because he so combined intellectual power with spiritual insight and with moral vigor. You see, you don't have to limit yourself to the little guys. You can know the giants and become in some sense gigantic yourself. You may not be great, but you can walk with the great. And what is still better than that is you can help other people to walk with the great. And unless you do, it is quite possible that some of them will never know some of the best ideas that there have ever been in the world. Once in a while, a teacher needs an encouragement. Well, I had one this evening. A young man who's in this room came up here to the head table, and I said to him, what is the definition of patron in Johnson's dictionary? And he said, a patron is a person who pays with indolence and is paid by flattery. Could you do it? That's great stuff, isn't it? And then, of course, when we all talk about Johnson's dictionary, we shift over to his definition of oats. Oats, a grain which in England is fed to horses and in Scotland supports the people. And a Scotsman picked up the first edition of the dictionary and said, and sir, where except in England do you find such horses? And where except in Scotland do you find such people? But all of this is a field of greatness that is open to everyone who will do it. But most people will not unless somebody encourages it. And so you see, you are the society of the encouragers. Now this is why I've worked so hard with my writing. I suppose the best help that I ever gave was 40 years ago when I finished and submitted a book called The Predicament of Modern Man. The best thinking that I could do on the human situation. 40 years ago this month, I sent that to the publisher. I have no way of knowing how many readers. I know that it's in several 100,000. And that it was digested as a Reader's Digest, and for that I was extremely grateful, because there I had 11 million readers. And now imagine my joy in having that come out again, out of print for a long time, and available for people like you if you are willing to put your mind on it. And by bringing it out in a paperback, we reduce the price drastically. It was in this that there came to me so vividly the figure of speech of a cut flower civilization. Many of you know the figure. Namely, that however much technology you have, however rich you are, however much you have oil and machinery and grain, that if you sever the roots of your spiritual life, you will wither and die. It gives me no comfort to know that much of what I said about that 40 years ago has been verified in fact. The withering is obvious at so many points, and we have to change it. The experience, the responsibility of people in this room is really awesome. Think of the people who have no meaning in their lives and are not likely to have any unless for your influence on their lives. And so, dear friends, we are in a great company. We are in a great work. But we cannot achieve it unless we really learn to think. How, for example, are you going to answer a person who is an upholder of determinism, by which we mean every event is absolutely caused by previous events, and that includes all the ideas in your minds. Therefore, there is no free will. Therefore, there is no moral responsibility. What those people don't see is that if that were the case, then their very proposition itself would be undermined, because it would be equally necessitated. But they don't think that hard. It's your job to think that hard. I am so glad that one person in this company is writing a book now on the philosophy of Lord Balfour, who made that the very core of his understanding long before he was Foreign Minister of England. A marvelous man who combined the intellectual, the Christian, and the political life in one context. I hope I get a number of you working on such things. One woman here worked in my study today all afternoon on a book. There are so many that are needed. And I want to encourage you to believe that you can do it. Do not think that because we are outnumbered, we are therefore destroyed. A powerful minority may do marvelous things. And I call to your attention the tremendous fact that Christians have in every generation been able to outthink all opposition. You go back to the time of Augustine, 400 AD, for example. And we've had a succession of powerful Christian minds from that time until this. One of the most powerful being that of the late William Temple, Archbishop of Canterbury. You have tremendous assets on your side. And therefore I say to you, do not be afraid. The Christian faith is something that can be defended and supported in spite of all the surrounding confusion. But you don't do it by some trick words. You don't do that unless you think through your own position and know where you stand. Do you really know why you believe in God? Many don't have the slightest idea. They just go through the motions. And unless people like you help them to know, the chance that they will know is not really very great. On the whole, they cannot do it themselves. Now, I think we shall survive. After all, the Christian movement has been amazingly able to survive in the face of opposition. Think how we survived against the worst of the Roman emperors. After all, there was a Nero. But Nero did not destroy the gospel. Since we have been able to endure all kinds of opposition and ridicule, we can endure anything that the end of the 20th century can throw at us. You're on the winning side. The Christian faith is powerful, rational, honest, and intelligent. But it has to be understood. Now, there may be many calls upon your time. It is important that you manage your family well, your business, your profession. But beyond that is the way you represent the faith of Jesus Christ in the world. Here is where you are the emissaries. Here is where you will make the greatest difference. And do not think that the faith is obsolete or washed out. We are still in the vital phases of the Christian faith. We are still early Christians. We are still in a period in which the faith is flexible enough to adjust itself to all kinds and conditions. And so I congratulate you. I do not know how long you will live, and you do not know how long I can live. But we know this. We are alive tonight. And we love one another. And our ministry is clear. The Lord's name be praised.